Hello, everyone. Welcome to Social Justice. Let's get started. The sun hadn't fully risen. Charles de Gaulle Airport remained silent in the late spring chill. Dim lights scattered across the glossy floor, broken only by the soft hum of suitcase wheels rolling past. At gate 37, a black man sat quietly by the large glass window, hands tucked in the pockets of a light gray hoodie, his gaze lost in the soft glow of the awakening sky. No one paid him any attention, no bows, no murmurs of recognition. He wore no luxury watch, had no bodyguards, carried no designer luggage. To everyone else, he looked like just another African traveler waiting for an early flight home. But he was far from ordinary. That man was Ibrahim Traoré, the sitting president of Burkina Faso, a head of state sitting alone like anyone else, not because he lacked options, but because he chose this. He didn't like displays of power, no red carpets, no cameras. Ibrahim believed leadership wasn't about spectacle, it was about how one lived among the people. Simple, quiet, grounded. He had just wrapped up a critical diplomatic mission in Europe, discussions about gold, sovereignty, and the future of the African continent. But in that moment, all he wanted was to go home. A gentle announcement echoed through the terminal. Flight AF 542 to Ouagadougou is now boarding. Ibrahim stood up, nodded politely to a janitor passing by, and greeted him softly in French. Bonjour, ça va? The worker smiled back, completely unaware that he had just been acknowledged by a head of state, as if by an old friend. Ibrahim boarded the plane with a quiet presence. No pushing, no eyes turning to watch him. Seat 2A, business class, window side, waited for him like an old companion. He sat down, buckled his seatbelt, and unlocked his phone to read the news. Just another ordinary day, but not for everyone. A few minutes later, the terminal doors opened once more. A Frenchman strode in, dark blue tailored suit, sharp as glass, shiny leather shoes clicking on the floor. 3 assistants trailed behind him, tablets and folders in hand. His name, Vincent Delorme, CEO of a major energy conglomerate heavily invested in West Africa. Vincent was used to skipping lines, used to champagne before takeoff, used to his seat always being ready, even when he showed up late, used to airport staff looking at him with polite submission. But today, something didn't follow the script. "We're very sorry, sir," said the gate agent with polite composure. "Business class is now full." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You must be mistaken. I booked my seat a week ago. Where is it?" "Yes, sir, but some passengers arrived ahead of you. We can't—" He cut her off, voice cool and sharp. "I am a strategic partner of the Burkinabe government. I do not fly economy." The air suddenly turned uneasy. The agent nervously checked her tablet again. People nearby started to glance over, still silent, but something was shifting. And just then, a quiet call came through a staff radio. "Claire, we need help on board. There's a special guest requesting a seat." A few minutes later, Claire Bellamy, the lead flight attendant, stepped in, tall, blonde, hair neatly tied back, Air France uniform, crisp and pressed, her face cool, eyes sharp, her stride calm, confident, unmistakably that of someone ready to handle a situation. But this situation would not be like the others. Claire boarded the plane with the poise of a seasoned professional. She'd handled hundreds of priority seat issues over the years, and most were resolved with a polite smile and a strategic offer. She entered the business class cabin. Her eyes scanned the rows swiftly until they paused. Seat 2A. A black man sat neatly by the window, wearing a simple gray hoodie. No luggage beside him, no luxury watch, no laptop open, nothing about him screamed important. To Claire, it was an anomaly, someone who didn't fit the business class pattern. She leaned toward the flight attendant beside her and whispered, "Might be a seating error." She approached the seat. A polite smile formed on her lips, but not in her eyes. "Excuse me, sir, may I please see your boarding pass?" The man, President Ibrahim Traoré, looked up. His gaze was calm, but piercing. He said nothing, just handed her the ticket. Claire looked down. Seat 2A. Correct. No mistake. But something inside her remained unsettled. There was something off, by the standards she had grown used to. A few seconds passed, then she returned, this time not just to verify, but to request. "Sir, I'm sorry, but there's been a slight change. A very important passenger needs this seat. Would you mind moving to economy? The airline will fully compensate you." Ibrahim wasn't surprised. He simply raised an eyebrow. "Why me?" Claire smiled, trying to keep her voice soft. "No particular reason, sir, just a minor adjustment." "So, that person is more important than I am?" he asked, eyes locked onto hers. She didn't answer, just smiled, that cold, procedural kind of smile. A few nearby passengers began to glance over. No one said a word, but someone, somewhere, felt the imbalance. Ibrahim leaned back in his seat, resting one hand on the armrest, and said slowly, "I will stay here." Claire froze. She wasn't used to that answer, especially not from someone who looked like that. In business class, on a Europe to Africa flight, Claire stood frozen for a few seconds, long enough to realize the man in front of her wasn't going to budge. She gripped her clipboard a little tighter, her smile tightened too, no longer graceful but edged with a hint of challenge. "Sir, I'm afraid this could affect flight operations. I really need your cooperation." Ibrahim didn't move. He tilted his head slightly, voice low and clear. "If it's an operational matter, why not ask someone else?" Claire hesitated. A simple question, but she had no good answer. She couldn't say that the others looked more like business class passengers. She couldn't admit that she had singled him out because he didn't fit the image. Instead, Claire turned away, with a tight-lipped smile masking her loss of control. The atmosphere in the cabin began to shift. A man lowered his newspaper. A woman paused mid-keystroke. Everyone remained silent, but the air had changed. The comfort was gone. Claire walked to the back of the cabin, whispering to the crew, then returned, this time not alone. She approached another passenger, also a man of color. "Sir, may I ask you to switch seats?" The young man, likely in his late 20s, David Nkomo, looked up, confused. "But I'm sitting in the right seat, aren't I?" She didn't answer, just held out her hand, waiting for his ticket. And then a voice cut through the cabin, not loud, but heavy, like a stone dropped into still water. "That's enough." Ibrahim stood, not with anger, not with theatrics, just calm, but his eyes froze the air around him. "You are selecting passengers to move, not by their ticket, but by their skin. That is called discrimination." Claire stepped back, half a pace. For the first time that day, she looked afraid. She tried to compose herself, whispering, "Sir, please sit down. Let's not escalate this." Ibrahim held her gaze, and this time no one in the cabin dared to look away. The aircraft began to taxi toward the runway. Outside, the sun had risen. The sky was a crisp, cloudless blue, calm as if nothing had happened. But inside the cabin, the silence was heavy. No raised voices, no arguments, just a thick, cautious stillness, like the air before a storm that never breaks. Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly back in his original seat. He fastened his seatbelt, rested one hand gently on the armrest. No more words, no phone calls, no complaints, no mention of who he was. Just a black man in a gray hoodie, sitting still as if watching a film he'd already seen the ending of. Claire, on the other hand, was different now. She moved up and down the aisle, carefully avoiding eye contact with the passengers who had witnessed everything. Her hand trembled slightly as she checked the manifest. Still, she smiled, but only at one man. Vincent Delorme, the French CEO, was now comfortably seated in business class. She poured him his second glass of champagne, adjusted his headrest, And when he asked about the African investment rollout, she leaned in and smiled. Of course, they should be grateful you're bringing order. Just 2 rows behind them, the very man they were speaking about sat still, one hand resting on his knee, eyes on the window. He heard every word, but said nothing. A nearby passenger, Fatima Kone, a Burkinabe nurse returning home, shook her head gently. She whispered to the person beside her, "That's our president. They don't realize what they've just done." The person next to her widened their eyes, but didn't say a word. Everyone understood. He didn't need anyone to speak up for him. He was rewriting the narrative with his silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now descending. Please fasten your seatbelts." The announcement rang out in both French and English. Beneath the African sun, the sky above Ouagadougou glowed like silk, golden, vibrant, alive. The aircraft tilted gently, beginning its descent. From seat 2A, Ibrahim Traoré looked down on the waking city. Terracotta rooftops, green trees lining wide roads, low towers stretching into the light of a new day. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if saying goodbye to an invisible sorrow left behind in the skies over Paris. In the cabin, Claire was still smiling, but not for everyone, just for Vincent, who was adjusting his tie and looking toward the exit. "They must be waiting for me already," he said smugly. "I'm involved in every solar energy project here, after all." Claire chuckled lightly, ready to escort her important passenger off the plane like true VIP protocol. But the moment the wheels touched the ground, everything changed. From the windows, passengers began to notice something unusual. A convoy of sleek black SUVs, special forces lined up along the tarmac, national flags, ministerial banners, honor guard uniforms, gleaming golden caps. It looked like a full state welcome, but not for a foreign businessman. One foreign traveler whispered, "Are we landing in a conflict zone?" Another shook their head. "No, it looks like they're welcoming someone important." Vincent smiled, self-satisfied. "Told you it's for me." Claire nodded, holding her clipboard, ready to signal the crew. But before they could rise from their seats, the aircraft door opened. A tall officer stepped in, wearing a black beret, polished boots. His every footstep echoed through a cabin holding its breath. He walked slowly, deliberately, eyes straight ahead, no glances, no words, until he stopped at seat 2A. He raised his hand and gave a full military salute. "Mr. President, welcome home." The entire cabin froze. 1 second, 2 seconds. Someone dropped a coffee spoon. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. Vincent stood paralyzed. Claire turned ghost pale. Ibrahim Traoré rose from his seat, slowly, without a word. His eyes scanned the cabin, not with anger, not with pride, but with the calm of someone who knew truth always arrives, even if it has to fly home quietly. The atmosphere in the business class cabin grew so dense, it was almost hard to breathe. Ibrahim Traoré remained standing. He gave a subtle nod to the officer beside him, then turned to face Claire, the flight attendant who had once asked him to move to economy for operational reasons. His gaze held no rage, but it also held no softness, just the kind of look one person gives another when they've seen through everything. A second officer stepped onto the plane, his expression cold, military. He didn't look at anyone else, just directly at 2 people. "Ms. Claire Bellamy and Mr. Vincent Delorme, you are requested to disembark the plane." Claire froze. "Me? I don't understand. Why me? I was only doing my job." The officer's tone didn't change. "You insulted the head of state on Burkinabe soil. That is a serious offense." Vincent flushed red, stammering, "Wait, I'm an investor. I have rights." The officer cut in, firm. "In this country, no one has the right to insult another person's dignity, especially not our president." Claire turned to the passengers, hoping someone, anyone, would defend her. But no one said a word, not because they were afraid, but because everyone knew she had earned this ending. Ibrahim said nothing. He turned and walked off the plane. No triumph, no backward glance, just a man who had passed a human test and let silence deliver the final lesson. As Ibrahim Traoré stepped down the aircraft stairs, a ripple of quiet awe swept through Ouagadougou Airport. The honor guard stood in two perfect lines, sharp as blades catching the morning light. National flags fluttered. The sound of military boots echoed with steady precision across the tarmac. This was no ordinary welcome. This was the return of a man who had chosen silence to teach the world a lesson. He walked slowly, no rush, no spectacle. Around him were his ministers, defense, foreign affairs, interior, all present. They said nothing. They only bowed their heads, eyes filled with deep respect. And beyond the security perimeter, the people of Ouagadougou watched. Applause spread gently, like waves against the stone. No loudspeakers, no banners, just a quiet gratitude that had no need for words. Gratitude for a leader who didn't need to raise his voice to show the strength of his power. Inside a small airport press room, just a few microphones and a plain backdrop, Ibrahim took the podium. He stood tall, no notes, no teleprompter. His eyes scanned the room. Then, in a slow, steady voice, each word chosen with the dignity of an entire nation, he said, "In Burkina Faso, we do not measure human worth by skin color. We do not bow to money or colonial habits. We respect dignity. We respect people. And that is today's Africa." No one clapped, not because they didn't agree, but because everyone stood still to preserve that moment. The first video surfaced just a few hours later. A fellow passenger, identity unknown, had managed to record the moment the officer saluted. "Mr. President, welcome home." Just one sentence, but on social media, it struck like thunder across a sleeping sky. Within 24 hours, the world was watching. Respect, Africa, justice. For Burkina, our eyes stand with Traoré all trended globally. The image of Ibrahim Traoré sitting quietly in seat 2A was shared millions of times, always with one caption: "Never judge a person by their appearance." In Paris, the headquarters of Air France plunged into a PR crisis. A hurried press release was issued, full of corporate phrasing. "We apologize if the recent incident caused misunderstanding or distress." But the public was no longer asking for apologies. They wanted accountability. Back in Ouagadougou, the courts moved swiftly. Claire Bellamy and Vincent Delorme were placed under temporary detention, pending investigation. Charges: insulting a head of state, public discrimination on sovereign territory. Claire wept during the interrogation. "I didn't know he was the president." The investigator looked at her and said, without a hint of sympathy, "You didn't need to know. You only needed to treat him like a human being." Vincent, the man who once believed money could buy anything, now faced possible prosecution in both Burkina Faso and France. Every attempt to call in diplomatic favors was met with the same reply from the Burkinabe government: "This is not a colony, this is a sovereign nation, and before the law, all people are equal." Ibrahim Traoré never sought revenge. No flashy press conference, no mocking social media posts, no television appearances recounting the humiliation. Instead, he quietly returned to his office. The same wooden desk, the road development maps, drafts of vocational training programs for youth, and a new photo quietly placed on a bookshelf. A photo of seat 2A, empty, shot from an angle bathed in the soft morning light falling across the armrest. No one knew who took it, but it sat there like a silent reminder. Power isn't where you sit, it's how you respond when you're being underestimated, with calm and dignity. Out there, millions of young Africans shared the story, not in anger, but in hope. A student blogger wrote, "He didn't shout, he didn't slam his fist, but he made the world stop, just by staying still." In France, a group of flight attendants started an internal forum, sharing their experiences, relearning professionalism, and confronting the unconscious roots of bias. In Ghana, a local airline renamed a business class section Traoré Class for those who deserve it. No proof required. Claire and Vincent? No one talked about them anymore. They faded quietly into the shadow they themselves had created, because disrespect can be forgiven, but arrogance always leaves a stain. And Ibrahim Traoré? He never told the story, not on TV, not in memoirs, not in any speech, because he understood some stories don't need to be retold. The world has already spoken for him. If you loved this story, don't forget, like, to help goodness travel further. Subscribe for more stories that move your soul, and keep watching. The next one might just stay with you forever. See you in the next story.